A good Sunday morning to you and welcome back. It is now 10 minutes before the top of the hour and time now for your tropical update. And things are becoming much more active throughout the tropics as we have several areas of concern. Let's start things off first of all by looking at our big broad satellite perspective from the Atlantic Basin. And first of all, we see some clouds looming off the Carolina coast. That is Tropical Storm Cristobal. But we're also, too, seeing some bright, ominous clouds, too, over parts of the Caribbean. That is a vigorous tropical wave that we're watching closely as well as it continues to drift westward across the Lesser Antilles and back over across the Caribbean. And then we're also monitoring several tropical waves that have been rolling off the coast, just a conveyor belt of one storm system after another. And it's really showing us that as we move into July and certainly August, too, things are becoming increasingly more active here across the Atlantic Basin. Well, let's zoom in closer. First of all, we're talking about Tropical Storm Cristobal. Right now, it's still a tropical storm packing winds of 45 miles per hour and roughly centered about 130 miles away from Cape Hatteras, North Carolina. Now, we do see that the system is moving off in a northeasterly fashion. It will continue to slowly move to the northeast throughout the rest of today, moving parallel to the coast. And because of that, tropical storm warnings continue across the outer banks of North Carolina. Now, our biggest concern with Tropical Storm Cristobal will be some choppy waters, turbulent conditions throughout the coastal areas, and we might actually see waves expanding from 7 to about 10 feet high today. And because of that, we could see issues with some beach erosion and coastal flooding, especially during times of high tide. There's also a concern, too, for some dangerous rip currents. So please think twice before venturing into the water, at least this weekend, because we're going to be seeing some of those choppy waters and rough conditions. And even a really experienced swimmer can see some serious problems here. So just be really careful before venturing into the water today with those dangerous rip currents up and down the Carolina shoreline. From our satellite perspective, well, Cristobal not looking quite as well organized as what it could be. We're still seeing some brighter shades of convection showing us the squalliest weather, primarily east of the center of circulation. So that shows us that the system is still very lopsided. All the heaviest weather continues over the open waters here, but throughout the day today there will be bands of showers and storms coming on shore, and some of these could be packing some very heavy amounts of rainfall. Here's our forecast track for Cristobal. It continues to move parallel to the coast. Early on next week, though, it will eventually pull away from the coastline. So we think at least for the next 24 hours or so, we'll still feel the effects of those dangerous rip currents, but then gradually things will start to subside and those waves will start to wind down as Cristobal pulls away from the eastern seaboard. But I'll tell you what, Cristobal is not the only game in town. We're watching also very closely this vigorous wave that continues to work its way across the Caribbean. Very stormy weather right now for the Grand Cayman Islands, and the system will continue to work off towards the west, eventually impacting the Yucatan Peninsula we're expecting. Also, too, we have Tropical Storm Bertha still out there. This is the longest-lived tropical storm that we've ever had for the month of July. Right now, it's packing winds of 70 miles per hour. It is racing off towards the northeast very quickly. The good news, it poses no threat to any land areas. It will be a concern, though, for shipping interests across the northern Atlantic. And over time, this may eventually impact the British Isles, believe it or not. Meanwhile, across the Pacific side, we have Hurricane Fausto. It is packing winds of 85 miles per hour, moving more or less parallel to the coastline. The good news is that over time, this system will continue to pull away from the Mexican shoreline, so things will be improving there. But at least for the next day or so, we're still watching out for some dangerous surf along the Mexican shoreline. So here, too, swimmers and mariners really have to exercise extreme caution with some choppy waters off the Mexican coast. Well, there's much more to hurricanes than what meets the eye, especially when we're talking about hurricane eyes. A few eye openers are coming up this morning in this Hurricane Minute.
A hurricane can have an eye, even if you can't see it on satellite.
That's because there can be just a veil of cirrus that covers the top of the eye of the hurricane so you can't see underneath it. We can see that now very easily with microwave imagery, so it can't fool us anymore.
Also, the size of the eye doesn't necessarily correspond to the strength of the winds around it.
The thing we can say is a very large eye of a hurricane is more damaging to the coast because more of the coast feels the strongest winds in a hurricane. The other interesting thing is if you have an eye that is contracting, getting smaller with time, sometimes that's related to strengthening of the hurricane, as it sort of tends to wind up much like an ice skater with their arms out. When they pull their arms in, they spin faster.
This is called an eye wall replacement cycle.
If if you have beach plans for this weekend, here's the forecast for Cape Cod. We will expect some scattered thunderstorms today for both around the Cape Cod area and around the Outer Banks, and even back on into around the area through tomorrow. It still stays a little bit unsettled. For Jones Beach, not looking too bad for a beach day today, although enjoy today's weather because the nice conditions will not be lasting through tomorrow. And finally, we head a little bit farther to the south for Atlantic City. Hot stuff on tap today and more stormy weather possible, though, for Monday.